Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel World of Knowledge. Today we are going to discuss about lyrical ballads. Let's start.
Wordsworth and Coleridge published a collection of poems titled Lyrical Ballads in 1798. With this publication began the Romantic revival in English poetry. The collection contained a number of poems by Wordsworth and a few by Coleridge. The second edition appeared in 1800, to which Wordsworth wrote a preface. In the preface, Wordsworth elaborates on his idea of poetry, of poetic languages. He justifies his use of meter and speaks of his poetic habits. Preface to the Lyrical Ballads is often regarded as the manifesto of English Romanticism. Of his subject matter, Wordsworth says that he selected events and situations from common man's life and related them in a language really used by common men. To this, we added a coloring of imagination, feeling that these are not enough to make good poems. He made an attempt in each poem to trace the basic aspects of human nature, to find out how human beings may respond to events and situations when they are emotionally excited. Wordsworth selected the life of a common man as his subject because such restricted people are closer to the most beautiful aspects of nature. In them, the basic human passions exist in all purity, and such people speaks from the depth of their heart, as they are not affected by social vanity. Such a language is the most philosophical and most permanent. Wordsworth remarks that the poems in lyrical ballads are different because they contain their worthy purpose. This purpose is not deliberate but the result of his poetic habit. When Wordsworth gets a topic worthy to be composed a poem upon, he meditates on that subject. By meditation, Wordsworth means long and deep thought. In this process, the subjects are connected to the most vital aspects of human rights. Wordsworth and Coleridge composed a poem on worthy topics because their intention was to introduce good poems to the English readers who were familiarizing themselves with the substandard poetry of the time. Regarding his poetic style, Wordsworth remarks that he avoided a special poetic diction and figures like personification to bring his language closer to that of the common man. Though his poems suffered on the side of beauty, they came to have good sense.
Preface to lyrical ballads has become controversial mainly on account of Wordsworth's remark on poetic language. He states that essentially there is no difference between the language of poetry and that of prose when prose is well written. To support his argument, Wordsworth states that the best lines from the best poems by the great poets like Shakespeare and Milton are written in a language no different from the language of prose. Wordsworth's statement caused a controversy because he preferred a metrical language for his poems.
Wordsworth justifies his use of meter on several grounds. He writes upon great subject matters like universal human passions and the mystery and wonder of the universe. Such subject matters require a dignified language, and meter guarantees such a language. Meter has a special capacity to restrain our feelings so that they do not become painful to the reader. Meter can also bring the poet and the reader closer because Both are subjecting themselves to the same kind of rules. These advantages of meter prompted Wordsworth to employ it, despite his statement that there is no difference between the language of prose and poetry. Wordsworth speaking about the function of poetry. Wordsworth remarks that primarily a poem should please the reader. In this context, he compares a poet to a biograph and an historian. While the last two composed under a number of conditions, a poet is restricted only by a single condition. He has to provide immediate pleasure to an ordinary human being. He also makes a contrast between poetic truth and scientific truth. Wordsworth denies any antagonism between poetry and science. Both the poet and the man of science are going after knowledge. They derive a pleasure in this pursuit of knowledge. A poet focuses its attention on the constant action and interaction between man and nature from which language arises. So, towards Wordsworth, poetry is the finer spirit of all true knowledge. It is displeasure arising out of knowledge that is ideal in poetry. To Wordsworth, poetic truth is concerned with the universal human passions. So, unlike the truth of science, it may affect us immediately. A great poem can be composed even on the most complex scientific theory provided it has a close human touch. On the question of fidelity, Wordsworth remarks that a poet can be more sincere on his composition is subjective by a biographer and a historian. Relies on a number of sources which cannot be always truth.
Wordsworth describes a poet as a man speaking to men. A poet is different from an ordinary man, not in kind but in degree. An ordinary man has the faculties of imagination, sensibility, etc. All these have in a poet in a greater degree. While selecting the subject matter from poetry, a poet has to be guided by taste and feelings. If the selection of the subject is judicious, language is not a problem. The subject itself will suggest its language. If meter is added, pleasure is guaranteed to the reader.
Wordsworth suggests that the language of common men cannot be used as such for poetic composition because common men's language has some elements of roughness in it. So, Wordsworth preferred a purified language of common man for poetic purposes. This purification or suggestion makes the job of poet artificial to some extent. Wordsworth famously defined poetry as the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin from emotions recollected in tranquility. When a poet derives emotions from his experiences, he carries away these emotions, subjecting them to a process of meditation. When these emotions become intense in the poet's mind, he feels a kind of restlessness. Actual composition begins at this point of restlessness. The poet derives a pleasure while composing, and part of this pleasure is communicated to the reader. Wordsworth appeals to the reader to judge his poems by their own poems because poetic appreciation is purely individual. He also suggests to the reader to show provisional sympathy to the poet, not to reject a poet or poem after a single reading. Rereading is the healthy literary habit because some hidden meanings and the shapes of meaning of words may come to light. Poem is subjected to multiple readings.